Good morning, fellas. Good to see you all, like always, and thanks for joining in. We'll go ahead and get started with our series in the Gospel of John. We're now rolling into John 18:6, and as you can see, you've seen the A before. This is such this is such a meaningfully packed verse, this 18:5 and 6. We'll read the verses together, that I broke it into two. And so just bear with me on it because there's a lot here, really some, not because I'm saying it, but some really great things to think about. And I'm just, I kind of worked with the title of this one and I shortened it because I want to emphasize the idea we need. We need. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I had different ways that I would finish that, but we're going to leave it as is. We need. Last time, this is I think all of us were here. Not sure, Art, if you were here or not, but last time, this graphic, even though it looks really convoluted and busy, is something we're going to go back to several times throughout this last section because I think it depicts a lot of important ideas in regard to how we interpret our faith, especially in the realm of union with Christ. When we're talking about union, um, and so we're going to be referring to this. But last time I proposed the idea that at any current state that we're in, at any given moment, regardless of the details, I can embrace what I think is the truth that each of us on this call and each of all of humanity were unconditionally loved by our Creator. That's what we talked about. And then the point of that is it's amazing how I get the rolling of the eyes at this statement. Well, I know that. Well, good. That's good. It's this to me is becoming more and more meaningful to me personally. And what's meaningful is that as I am learning how to embrace this as true for me, I tend to make better choices, choices that are more in line with the bigger picture, rather than my own selfish personal needs and selfish desires. So that is what we talked about last week. We discussed that. Now we move to 18. Actually, we looked at 18:5 last week, and we'll move on to 6. But reading them together, the crowd, remember the crowd, they're there in the garden. They're getting there. They're there to arrest Jesus. And they say, "We want Jesus the Nazarene." He said to them rather, "I'm he." And Judas also, who was betraying him, was standing with him. That's where we left last week. When therefore he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. And I think Bill brought up last week the he is in italics, meaning they added that for meaning, but it's really the I am, echoing out of Moses's interaction. Tell them I am sent you. I think it's Exodus 13. So um, the I am. And we're going to really focus in on that this week. Overview. Jesus is in the garden with his disciples. We know that. Joining Judas, we have the Roman cohort, the officers from the chief priests, and the officers from the Pharisees. There is a large entourage of people there to arrest Jesus. Good morning, Jeff. Good to have you. And it I don't, they're not, have they played this out yet in The Chosen? Have you guys seen how they've depicted this?
That's how they end. So the whole new Chosen series is on the Last Supper, and the last in the new series. This is where it ends.
So have you seen the ending yet? I mean,
Yeah, but at
well,
the
I'm curious, do they show an entourage of people arresting Jesus?
well, it's dark and you can't really tell, but
Yeah.
um, yes, but not like a multitude.
Yeah. Well, it's up for debate. Some commentators say, well, a Roman cohort is 600 people. We don't know, but there's more than one or two. It's not the detective and the special agent. It's a group of people. And this then within the text leads to or is revealed. That group, they are outfitted with lanterns, torches, and weapons to apprehend the suspect. They come equipped. And we talked about the meaning, the metaphorical meaning of these things for us, what this means, but they brought lanterns, torches, and weapons. And then they are there to arrest Jesus. And when Jesus makes a self expression, a positive ID that he is Jesus the Nazarene, it says they all drew back and fell to the ground. And I got my little yellow graphic here. They all drew back and fell to the ground. So that's where we're going to be landing on this idea for the next couple of weeks. Um, and that's what about. And we go, wow, that's something. What does this mean? And that's what 232A and B is about. Now, I put this in just as a review of where we have been. And I spent some time on creating this graph for you guys because you may want to go to our website and actually look at these. It's interesting. You got the references of the I am statements within John. To the left, you've got the statement itself, and then you've got a brief description. So if you ever do a comparative study or meditation, you can use this as a tool. Now it says up in the column upper right, it says with the predicate nominative. What that means is that when Jesus uses the word I am, he's saying, I am this, the predicate nominative, a modifier um, to the I am statement. So I am the bread of life. The predicate nominative is the bread of life. And the reason I make this distinction is because there are some I am statements without the predicate nominative. And so in these, beginning at John 4:26, ending up at John 18:5-6, and that's where we are now. These are without the predicate nominative, just basically I am. And then the meaning, the brief description on the right. And that's really for you guys. And I thought this is such an important thing. I just thought it'd be good to kind of make it in a cohesive way that you can look at it and refer to it. So it's there on a website, week 232A. So Dave Brown is not on the call, but we want to give Dave a big thank you. He sent this out. He has sent it before. I've read this, but I wanted to paste it in and say thank you to Dave because he's done some work on this idea of the I am, specifically looking at it from the Hebraic mentality or the mindset. And I think it's super helpful. And thank you, Dave. And I'm going to make some comments, but before I do you guys any comments you have on this subject? I was thinking that Dave might join us and want to say a few things, but you guys have anything you want to say? Okay, I'll go.
Just a clarification, Mike. When you get to the Old Testament, when God talks to Moses, he says, "I am what I am." It's Yahweh. That's Greek. I mean, that's Hebrew, of course.
Yeah, it's Hebrew. Yeah.
But when you get into New Testament, when you use the word Lord or the Yahweh, it's Kyrios, I think, is the word they use for Lord in the New Testament. So these are all echoes of that, but he is just saying specifically in Greek, he's just saying I, meaning me, I am. So it's one step removed from the what am I trying to, what's the name they call the tetrahedron, the word they give for the word of God. So it's there, but it's not exactly saying,
Oh,
he's not saying Yahweh. He's not saying the Greek equivalent of Yahweh, I guess is what I'm
no,
saying.
no, you're referencing the Tetragrammaton.
Right, right.
Yeah, and the four letters. That's not what we're talking about. It's a Greek equivalent to the idea that's expressed in the Old Testament, the I
Okay,
am. And of
okay.
course, we read that and go, what the heck does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about it a little bit here. So, and Dave
I got a
really hit this.
question for you, Mike.
What's
Um,
that? Oh,
I got
yeah.
a question for you because on all of these I am statements, he's very specific. He says I am. But when the Pharisees are asking him, are you the Christ or are you the questions they ask him throughout this period where he's in Jerusalem and leading up to the crucifixion, he uses a sentence that confuses me. He says, "You say that I am," or you know, it's like he's not exactly saying I am. He's saying that's what you say, and I don't I'm not getting what he's saying there. So I didn't read this, so I don't know if that's part of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, 'cause I can't read that. It's too small of a text for me to read, Mike. But
Well, yeah, and I didn't mean for you to read it here. You can pull it up, and you've got a copy he sent you.
okay.
Sorry, I was rude to you, Jeff. I want to acknowledge what you said, and I think we'll be addressing that, but I'm not sure. If we don't, please bring up your question.
Okay, yeah,
And
it's just it's an odd way of that he addresses the Pharisees and the leaders of the Sanhedrin differently than he's talking to a lot of his disciples, and even here is different. And maybe it's gotten to the point where he is admitting it so that things progress. But I'll ask the question later.
is the reference that you're referring to, have we looked at it, or are we going to look at it?
Well, and I don't know exactly where it is, so I'll do a little research myself and,
Right.
and find out what I'll tell you what exactly I'm referencing.
I think the focus, or I know the focus right here, Jeff, is going to be, what do we do with this statement? What is Jesus trying to express? And then once we have some level of foundation, then we can move to, well, then how do we use that idea? Does it relate to what Jesus is saying? Most likely, yes. And if so, how do we understand it within this context? So, the whole thing, I am, is really quite meaningless unless we really do a deep dive. Dave, Dave made a great attempt, a one-page attempt to explain it from the Hebraic mindset. Bill is piped into the Hebrew and the Greek meaning, and we know that this is referring to something that goes way back within the history of people. And so let's try to capture, what is being said here. So um, let's see, I got to go to this one. And Bill, I don't know if I finished what you were saying either. Sorry, I had two things I was responding to, and I kind of cut Jeff out of that, and I apologize. So comments, we don't have any comments. I'm going to start here with this phrase, I exist, and it's in the lower paragraph of what Dave sent. And of course, you can look at this online. It'll be posted tomorrow. And I took what Dave wrote. He cites the idea that in the Greek, the meaning, because the New Testament is written in Greek, the wording in Greek is ego eimi, I am. And and when Jesus said that, he's tying that to definitely the reference of Moses, and I believe it's Exodus 13, and other points as we've already listed on the screen. But what does this mean? I exist, and I made my attempt at explaining it. So there's really a short narrative here. At this moment, okay, think about the moment that it's at night. Jesus is alone in the garden with his disciples. And Judas comes leading this entourage of people, whoever they were, and they are all carrying lanterns, weapons, and torches, and they're going to arrest him. And so let's now go into that moment through our imagination and think about it. At this moment, all present, and that includes his followers, the betrayer, Judas, and those doing the arrest, categories of people. They're all in various places within their faith. Some are with Jesus, they're followers of Jesus, but there are those who are anti-Jesus. They are not followers, they are unbelievers, as we would call them. But all of these people, all present, exist. The very fact that they exist is because of Jesus the Nazarene. Their existence at that moment is due is a direct cause of Jesus the Nazarene. And that's because Jesus the Nazarene is the Word who has become flesh. He is God incarnate, according to what we believe. He loved. There was a moment in time he loved, he thought, and he created each of those individuals who are present at that moment. And all of this is an expression of his love. And because love is within the nature of God. At this moment, all present continue to exist. Not only it was true at one moment in time, but at this very moment, these people around him continue to exist, to live, because Jesus, the Nazarene, facilitates their existence right here, right now. This too is an expression of his love. They are being allowed to live within that moment because he holds all things together, out of Colossians chapter 1. So when Jesus states, ego eimi, I exist, it means he not only exists as Jesus the Nazarene, as an individual, but he is existence. He is the one who created these people, and he is the one holding these people and everything that exists into an orderly system, allowing existence at that very moment. All which exists locate their own existence in him. Thus, we say, in him we live and move and have our being. So what this means at this moment, we're going to go to another level of resolution. Each person present, regardless of their belief system, is connected to Jesus through creation. Each was individually thought about at one moment in time and then created unique as an expression of his love. They were each given the gift of life to live out their unique and personalized gift, just like you and I. In union, and we have no choice, we somehow interact, and that's what in union, we can actually be in union, or we can actually be quite out of sync of being in union, our choice. But the purpose under the loving hand of God is that creation itself lives within an affirmed unity with all else which exists, and it's all by his loving hand. I don't think God created us to fight with each other, is what this means. At this moment, each inhale and each exhale, each thought which enters their mind, each movement which follows, is all because they are being actively loved at this very moment. In him, all things hold together. Colossians chapter 1, he created all things, and through him, all things consist or hold together. That is happening in real time at this moment. Note his restraint. Now, I didn't want to bring this into the text, but I want to capture a note here because it empathizes and punctuates the loving restraint of God through Christ. His restraint at this moment demonstrates, from my perspective, the highest form of power. And that is power in submission to love. Instead, Jesus is there loving, and that loving has sustaining power, and he's being confronted face to face with hate, with suspicion, and with cruelty. Instead of striking back, he offers himself freely. Thus, the irony and beauty of what God is about. And to me, fellas, this is the good news. Steve or Bill, what is your thought?
Well, a couple. One is I don't want to go down rabbit trails along Richard Rohr, where Christ, Jesus is the incarnation of the Christ. And there's a Christ, as everybody, there's kind of two separate pieces here. But I keep thinking of Philippians chapter 2, where although like God, he emptied himself. And so I don't think at this moment he's deciding I can annihilate them with a thought. I think at this moment he says, I've given up the power to do that. I'm a man. Because Philippians says he descended, he became a man and got crucified. So I have a struggle thinking that in the back of his brain, he's kind of controlling the universe while he's talking to these people about what's going to happen. I think he laid that aside.
Okay, Bill, I don't know if Jesus is saying, hey, Joe, I remember the day I created you. I don't think it's to be accepted at that level. And we're not talking about that, but we're talking about the God, the incarnate God, who is standing there receiving this, and he's doing it willingly because he could act in quite a different way if he chose.
Well, yeah, I think he's doing it knowingly. I mean, because back to Philippians, he said he laid all that aside.
Yeah. How we talk about the mystery of the incarnation, is conjecture. But all I'm trying to do is state of the reality of what is happening here.
Yeah, I get it. They don't. Yeah, they can't grasp the idea of who's talking to them.
No, they don't. They don't get this. No. So with that, now I want to move to a graphic of what is occurring within this moment. And note down in the upper or down the lower right, it says it's night. And I don't think that's by accident. It's night and it's night. It's at a very dark time. And I think that has meaning to us. It's night. And within the night, we have Jesus. So I know this doesn't look like Jesus. I know it doesn't look like Jesus, but I don't really know what Jesus looked like. I really like Jesus in The Chosen. I mean, I really like.
Where's his robe?
Yeah. Well, I didn't put the robe on, but okay, it's what my graphic file has. So bear with me. It represents Jesus. So, and then we have P1, which is representative of person one. Let's call him Judas, because Judas is kind of leading the group, okay, to come and get him. And so P1 represents Judas, but he could be anybody, any person. And what P1 does is he creates a J1. J1 is how that person perceives Jesus. He doesn't perceive Jesus for who he really is. In The Chosen, Judas has a perception of how the Messiah, how Jesus should be. And I think because we're human, we all create a perception. We think we got it. And I don't think any of us really understand who Jesus really got it. I think all of us would say, well, I kind of understand, and there's images, but I don't have the full picture. And I think probably all of us would agree with that. Well, I'm illustrating it here. Person one creates a J1, and this is part of being human. And J1 then is attached to the face of Jesus. So now the P1 now sees Jesus, who the Jesus really is, or he now sees the person of Jesus through his own lenses. He is now looking at Jesus through a J1 perspective. And I've slowed this down here and illustrated it through P1 because I think what is true is that the whole crowd, which would include P person 2 through 10, I mean, illustrative here, and this includes Judas's P1, say, but this includes the disciples, even though they're all looking against, but there are some with Jesus, and there are some who are there to arrest Jesus, and from various disciplines, but they all have one thing in common. They all have their perception of what they've created in their heads in regard to who Jesus is. Thus, they all have a Jesus perception, J2 through J10. They all have that. And there's some correlation in what they believe, but there's a lot of misconstrued information about who Jesus is. There is a fair amount of confusion going on within this moment. So the crowd then projects their image onto Jesus. And so what we have is the crowd looking onto Jesus as not truly who Jesus is, but who they think him and who they need Jesus to be. And that is represented by the J. The P1 creates the J1 and so and so. So that's, from my perspective, that's what's occurring within this moment. And so how we tend to think of it, I think I'm proposing, fellas, what's true of them is actually true of us, not because we're bad people, it's because we're human people. And I think to the degree that we recognize that is a healthy situation. But if I were to say to you, yeah, I think I got Jesus nailed down, that is a road to be going south. There's more to it, not so fast. So how we tend to think of this verse, now we're going to look at how we read the verse, 18:6. And so we read the verse kind of like this. Now I'm not saying you do personally, I'm saying we do generally. And we have Jesus, who is this one servant that has gone through and done all of this good stuff. And we know the story. And now he's being arrested. And it breaks our heart because that is so unjust. Why is this happening to this man who doesn't deserve it? And that's how we approach the text. And so we have this situation, and Jesus speaks out, I am he, or I am, and it's like a lightning bolt. Forgive me, guys, but I really like my little graphic. So I put a smiley face on it because I like the little imagery, and so just bear with me in my weird sense of humor. Jesus knocks the crap out of these guys, and he, through his voice, bear with me, Bill, I am he, and everyone is knocked backwards at this moment. And we go, attaboy, Jesus, way to go. Because we as a population tend to think of this interaction as an application of force. Our where we go within our heads is it's a force, and Jesus is showing them who he really is in this moment of laying down, as you said, Bill. He sets this all aside. Yes, he did. He willingly set it aside. But what we focus in on here is the fact that is the application of force. He knocked them over. Now, the reason why is because we need something or someone who we perceive as a winner. So this goes back to my initial title for this, is that we need because we're human. We need justice to be served here. And so the way we do it, we apply force. This is not fair to Jesus. So this moment in time, we see Jesus speaking a word of truth, I am, and it knocks everybody back for a moment. And we go, great job. We like that. That's great. Now, bear with me, and again, it's not because we're bad people at all. We're human people. We need a winner. We need someone we can perceive as a winner. So we create our winner through defining an enemy. This is really where I'm going. We look at Jesus over, now there's a mixed crowd, I understand that. But in a sense, one way we read this is that Jesus is putting the bad guys in their place for a moment before the arrest takes place. And so we need to define an enemy. And I think that is part of human nature. If we can define an enemy, we can bring it together. Now, we see that I'm saying we impose upon that, but the crowd themselves need an enemy. And that's why they are coming to arrest Jesus. So note, to us, Jesus is a winner. To the crowd, Jesus is the enemy. And so everyone in this picture, including you and I, we tend to create from a P1, who we are, to a J1. And we're either looking for a winner or we're looking to define an enemy. That's what we see. We don't see who Jesus actually is. Everything is veiled at this moment, but we see human interaction applying force. Why? Because of what the people need Jesus to be at the moment. They need him to be an enemy. If they can arrest him and convict him, and as Caiaphas said prior in the text, don't you know that one man needs to die for the nation? That's exactly what we're seeing here. It's starting to play out. Now, this is where I'm going to try to play a video. I have watched a series called Designated Survivor. I don't know if you guys have. Season 1, episode 3, and the story of this TV series, it's on Netflix. The U.S. government is now wiped out because of an attack on the Capitol the night of the State of the Union address. Somebody blew up the Capitol, and the government, everybody there was killed. There were only 2 survivors. One is who became the new president, played by Kiefer Sutherland, and Congresswoman Kimball Hoekstrom, played by Virginia Madsen. And they're trying to figure out, with this disarray of government, this chaos going on, who blew up the Capitol. And this is a short interaction between the two as they're listening. There's some data out there that it could have been an Arab terrorist attack by an Arab group of people. So I'm going to try to play it.
Thank you for showing us wisdom. We had questions earlier about what was happening in West Wing. And since you represent Congress, I think it's important to bring you in when you get the proposal. Thank you. I hope you understand that we cannot show this to the public yet. Not until we can prove that every statement in the video is true. Otherwise, we run the risk of a national call to arms. Would that be such a terrible thing? With all due respect, sir, we need an enemy. And soon. The only thing that will pull us all together after this terrible decision. Well, we need the right enemy. We need to be absolutely certain we did this before we strike. And personally, I have a difficult time accepting that the only way to bring the country together is through war. You have a lot of difficult decisions ahead of you, sir. Speaking for Congress, I want to assure you that you have my complete support no matter what you decide. Thank you. And I would never want your job. Well, that makes two of us.
It's a great series. There's three seasons. I really liked the first season. The second one I watched a couple and I didn't really care for it, so I haven't really gone any farther. But the point is of this interaction is that we need an enemy so we can be winners. That is a human construct way of thinking, being human. If I can find blame, then we can bring the country together, according to the video. If I can find someone to blame, I can find unity around that individual. And it's without the church and it's within the church. People do horrible things to other people, all in the name of identifying the enemy so we can come together. Why? So I can feel I've got a winner. It's really a reflection of me. So table time. This is a way to look at it. We got Jesus conquering, showing power over force, over the people. Then they're all knocked back. We're going to pick up on this next week. Why? Because we need a winner. They need a winner. All people need a winner, and we do that through creating an enemy. Jesus is applying force over the bad guy. That's how we see it. We see it as, and again, guys, it's a generalized statement. We as human beings tend to read this as an application of force conquering the bad guys. And we need that in order, because in my perception is that to dominate the other is what we seem to need. And I say that through what I see, what I've done, I'm guilty, what has been done to me, and what I see happening around us every single day is this need to dominate so I can feel better about me. Someone needs to be the enemy. And with that, what are your thoughts? Oh, we got 20 minutes. Man, there's got to be some stuff to talk about within this text. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
I start at the buffet. I'm the guy at the front of the buffet, you know. I was just watching Wolf Hall the other night, and it's about Thomas Cramer, anyway. And he served the king, and he had a lot of power and authority and a lot of prestige until King Henry wanted him gone. And they put out the word that, well, he thought that was him, but he's a traitor now. And so when he's led to be chopped off, everybody's calling for his blood. I mean, it flipped a switch just quickly. So going back to that crowd of people coming after Jesus, saying they really don't know Jesus. Well, that's true, but they also do know. I mean, somebody put into their mind who Jesus was. He's an enemy. Somebody convinced them of that, and they rallied to it. So that could be flipped around in a moment, if somebody
It's
says, no,
a
he's not him, he's a
moment.
good guy. You know, there's an effect of crowd behavior here that is always scary.
What we see in the Palm Sunday and the the crucifixion 5 days later is exactly that. The switch can be turned just like that.
Yeah. Because nobody, I mean, this could get really psychological, but I don't know you, Mike. I know you pretty good. I know you better than a lot of people.
Yeah.
But unless I sit inside your head and see the world through your glasses, I can't say I totally know you. So I
Right.
only know you but I do know you better because of a relationship than I would if I didn't have a relationship
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. If we sit down for coffee and talk about meaningful things, you will get to know me and I will get to know you more.
Right, right.
But by just responding to this third person, like social media, or just he believes this, he believes this. And then, but we tend to build our own images based on that. And
Yeah.
so it creates more chaos, it creates separation and not a coming together to try to talk about it. Yeah, and I think it's not a church problem. Well, it is a church problem, but it's
It
it's a
is.
human problem. It's a human problem. And Jesus is right in the middle of this, and we're going to see how he operates within this context, which could be out of our morning newspaper.
Well, he does say, forgive them, they don't know what they do. He recognizes they don't know what they do.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, other thoughts, guys.
So since it's quiet, I thought Vince was going to talk, but uh, so generally, I agree, Mike. I mean, it's one way to look at this. I mean, when I watch movies, the old cowboy movies or
Yeah.
whatever, the good guys, the white hats, and the other guys,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we tend to identify with the good guys and the need to dominate. All these things going on. I thought maybe you were going to have a political discussion with this whole enemy thing and whatever, but that's another thing. So
Yeah, we're not going there, but it certainly is. It fits with this. Yeah.
I'm sorry. But anyway, the generally I see this differently. At least my first take at this is I see this as basically it reminds me of the verse, one day every knee's gonna bow.
Right.
So when we're in the presence of God, kind of, it's it's going to be like whoa, and we're going to we're going to like bow to this whole idea in the Old Testament of fearing God,
Yeah.
which we don't really like very much. And
Yeah.
then, but the idea of reverence a lot of the times, but there's a part of the God thing that is like whoa, and it's going to be right. We're all going to be time out. So
Yeah.
my first take at this when I see this is not this way. I see basically him saying I am, and there's something going on there. It's like whoa, and
Yeah.
they're just down, right?
And
They're
that,
acknowledging power or
yeah.
something.
Well, what you just expressed is what we will see in 232B. But in
Okay.
order to see the two, we've got to separate them in order to think about how we think. A lot of people, 232A is about the general perception of knocking others in force so I can get what I need. That is, but your mind, John, doesn't stop there. Neither does mine. I think that is a very sad commentary on how, at the level we think as people, this. But there is way more to this than that. And that's where we're going to go next week. But it was too much to talk about in 1 week. So, yeah. So, anyway, thank you, John. Yeah. What do you, Jeff, you usually come out with something here. So,
Yeah, well, my thought was, and the question is, is is Jesus applying force? And I agree with John that this is not Jesus applying force. This is a bunch of people, including myself, had I been there,
Yeah,
that realize when he says there is something when he says, I am he.
yeah,
The recognition of that I am statement for everybody is that they fall face down. That they say, I am not worthy to be even in this area
yeah.
because of who you are. So the natural reaction, and that the illustration here is weird because everybody's on their back. To me, they're all on their face because that's what it says. They
Oh,
fell down
oh,
on their.
really? I drew it wrong. I thought it said fall back. He fell out of the, sorry. I meant a
So,
textual
so
error.
the
Sorry.
reaction is from these people a recognition, which is not really an application of force, a recognition by those in there of the power and of the presence that they're in. And the natural reaction is to fall on your face. And that should be our reaction as well
Yeah.
when we encounter the living God.
But
So,
but it's
Well,
kind of like it's kind of
what
like he
you're
pulls the
saying,
veil aside. I'm
just a
sorry.
minute, Bill, and Jeff, you piggyback with John, and I could not agree with both of you more. But in order to see that, you guys see it differently. I see it differently. But in order for us to see it how we see it, it's really good for us, first of all, to look at what is what is on the surface here and how we as a general public tend to read it. But it's
It,
really there is so much more going on here. And
well,
we're gonna do a deeper dive into that next week.
it lends itself to a lot of subjective understanding because it didn't take. Sure, they all knocked down, but then they got back up and grabbed them. So what kind of veil was lifted or whatever kind of vision
Why
they
did
got, it was
Like,
very
why did they
brief.
forget? What,
Yeah.
why? Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about all that next week. I mean, I think it's so fascinating and get
Can
your,
I want to comment on another verse that was mentioned, and lately I've been reading about a guy on it, and it's that verse where it says, "At the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess," and
yeah,
this is everyone, okay?
yeah,
And they made a point in there that the words that they used was gladly. They will gladly knee. People aren't being coerced to their knees when they really see
right,
Jesus for who he is. They all gladly bow their knee, and I thought that was an interesting interpretation.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, that is worthy of meditation because for many years I have thought of that as there's going to be this long line, a really long line, and Jesus is there in front, and everybody has their turn. And depending on that choice, they either go one way or the other way.
Hmm.
Maybe there's another way to look at this. You know, maybe not. Maybe there is. So, yeah. Other comments, fellas?
Well, Mike, since we're quiet for a sec, I wanted to circle back on what I was saying earlier, and it's where he answers differently. And it is in every one of the other gospels. It is either a question asked by the Sanhedrin or the high priest or by Pilate. And the question asked by Pilate says, are you the king of the Jews? And he says, you say that I am.
Right. Yeah.
When he answers the Sanhedrin, it's the same thing when they say, are you the Christ or whatever? And he says, you say that I am. So I'm trying to figure out, and I'm going to have to do a deeper dive into the
Yeah.
Greek and Hebrew and all that stuff to figure out what that expression actually means. What is he saying by that? Is he admitting or is he making them dig deeper, by saying, is he saying, so what do you think?
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what that you say that I am phrase and it's in each of the gospels.
And do you think that it could relate, that idea could relate to what we'll be looking at in 7 through 9? Whereas, as Bill said, they get up from this occasion and they do a repeat. And he says, I am he. And then he has a different they don't fall back again. They don't seem to remember what's going on, but there's this question. So maybe by looking at that, when we get to that in 2 weeks, maybe it will shed some light on your question. Great question. And we'd all like to know what you think, in
Yeah,
that.
I'm gonna do a deeper dive and figure
Yeah.
out if I can
Yeah.
figure out what that expression actually means.
Yeah.
Well, that's the old Pentecostals will say they were slain in the spirit. That's not very helpful.
Well, it's one imagery. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would be, yeah, this would be, they were certainly taken back and they were affected within that moment, in a very profound way. And I think, Jeff and John, you guys said, well, I don't see it like this at all. Well, I don't either. But what we want to do is look at this first, and then we'll move into that. There's more here than there's way more going on. So, and the writer of the gospel is certainly got more in his mind to communicate rather than Jesus showing force over the bad guys. So,
This has a hint of what's it, Lazarus and the rich man at the gate, and he's in hell, and he says, "Go tell my brothers that they have the gospel, and they didn't see it." Well, these guys, whatever they saw, and I assume they saw some sort of a lifting of the veil, and then they got up again. That it wasn't sufficient. Okay, I get it. He's Jesus. I fear God, but then when it passes like a cloud, and they're back on their feet, ready to kill him.
I hope we can get into that discussion next week. That's a great question
Yeah.
to be thinking about. And I think it really has bearing on human nature and what it's like to actually come in contact with reality is who Jesus is.
Yeah.
Jesus is speaking out of reality. It really exists. It's not what the J1 images, the J1, 2, 3, the stuff that's in our heads is there because we help self-create it. But he's what we're going to see is a breaking into that in a profound way. And
I don't know if this adds to the discussion or detracts from it, but in verse 3, it says, a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. It does not say the chief priests and the Pharisees are here and part of this bunch that hears this, sees this, experiences this. I think they're all, gophers. They're sent to go get Jesus so he can come back and stand trial before the Sanhedrin and before the chief priests and the Pharisees. So they may not even be the ones that later on are the ones calling for his crucifixion. They may be the guys that delivered him, but there's a whole crowd of other people, including the chief priests and the Pharisees, that are the ones calling for his crucifixion. So these may not be the people that he stands trial in front of. They may be standing back there going, "Ooh, I don't know about this," kind of thing. That's the way I picture it.
yeah, that's very believable because, a Caiaphas doesn't go out and make the arrest. He sends people. He's got, you said, gophers or subordinates to go out and do it. If that's the case, what nuance does that add to the text? It's a great thought, Jeff. What does that add to what we're looking at here from your perspective?
Well, what it says to me is these guys experienced this, which they will probably have a hard time describing when they go back with Jesus, so they're not going to go, "Whoa, we fell on our face before this guy because we realized who he was." They're going to say, "This is what he said."
Yeah.
And then they're going to kind of get out of the picture while the chief priests and the Pharisees and even Pilate at some point dig deeper to
Yeah.
try and find out what it is that or who this is. I think that their their experience does not probably get transmitted or um, accurately described to those that are going to put Jesus on trial.
Yeah.
So uh, I can't imagine that they're going to go back as guys that were sent to get this criminal.
Yeah.
They're going to say, "Wow, this is what we experienced." They're just going to say, "This is what he said."
I think what you're saying is dead on, and it really correlates with Bill, Jeff, is that the experience that we're going to be well, we've looked at on their back, on your front, sorry, with the experience is short-lived.
Yeah.
What we want to read it is these guys all had this experience and they went back and convinced everybody and we live happily ever after. That didn't happen. They get up and they actually go through the same. He says it a second time, but they don't fall back. The question is why? Why is that? I think it'd be a fascinating discussion next week. So not that I have the answer, but I've been thinking about it. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I mean, since we got a little time, I think there's another situation almost like this at the tomb after the resurrection with the soldiers. I think the soldiers, fall down. I can't remember if it was Jesus or the angels, but basically, it's the same deal.
Yeah.
I think so. I listened to a Zoom on Friday. Denver Seminary had Kurt Thompson,
Oh,
the psychiatrist, there all day for their 75th anniversary. And it was real, if you guys know anything about Kurt Thompson. But anyway, um, one of the things he's a psychiatrist, and one of the things he does is recommend these small confessional communities, he calls them, small groups of people that actually share things. And he was saying, like, when we share our stories, um, like one person would become vulnerable and share their story. So sharing our stories is so powerful. Um, but where I'm going with this is, so we did this with my Philadelphia guys. We get together and whatever. And my normal response after somebody shares the story, I would say, so what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? Anything you want to ask? Right. So I kind of live in this left brain think world. Think, think, think. And so Thompson says they don't do that. So after somebody shares their story, he basically says, how do you feel about that? And where did you feel? And so he starts going down this other response level. So, like this, so one way to look at this whole story is, what do you think? And we tend to think that 90% of what we do is from what we think. But so what are our thoughts? But I'm thinking at this particular moment, the people laying down are not responding to a think thing. They're not thinking. They're just responding from a gut level.
yeah.
Right? This is like autopilot. Bonk, right? There's something else going on here. And then after a amount of time, then their brain kicks in again and they go, whoop, we got to get up. We got to arrest this guy.
Yeah.
Right. Then the brain
Right.
kicks in again. So there's this little pause. So that's my thought, is that your scenario, which I agree with, we need a winner, we need to dominate, and this goes on much of life. But I think there are times when that kicks out and autopilot kicks in, right? And it's like, whoa, right? It's just overtaken, but
Yeah,
It's a
another really,
visceral response.
yeah.
I
yeah,
think, it just happens.
They
You
did
can't
what they
overcome.
did. They did what they did because there was nothing else to do. They were brought into the presence in a moment that, as you say, John, wow. We're going to go into that. We're going to piggyback on those very thoughts next week and look at it from this perspective of,
Yeah.
what's going on here. And
I smell Rene Girard here somewhere.
well, Rene Girard is right here with "We Need an Enemy." I mean,
Yeah.
and that is a commentary on human nature that drives a lot of our action. But next week, as human frailty, people just like you and I, both believers, unbelievers, a mixed group in a microcosm, as they come together, and Jesus at that moment says, "I am," we get this common response by all. Some of you have cited there's a moment in time when every knee shall bow. Maybe it's a short window into that. Maybe we'll talk about it next week. So, guys, again, thank you for your interaction, engagement, and well, we got some stuff to think about, and we'll plan on. Let's see. Next week is May 7th. We'll be here next week. And so we'll see you guys next week.
We only have a couple more weeks of Bill, and then Bill's going to disappear.
Yeah, I'm going into paradise for a while.
Well, when you come back, you won't miss much.
Yeah, we'll still be in John, I guarantee you.
We'll see you guys. Thanks for joining in. Bye for now.
Fine.